It's fair to say, if you look back through my history with PlayStation 4 games, there was quite a marked difference in my taste throughout the entire console generation. When I first got the PlayStation 4, I was almost entirely playing first-person shooter games. A couple of racing games got thrown in the mix, but generally it was the first-person shooters that I carried over from the PlayStation 3. However, halfway through, I started experimenting with single-player games to the point where they became the most common type of game that I played on this console. And of course, the last game I purchased for the system had to be the strangest game I've potentially ever played, and that was Death Stranding. A game that intrigued me with the marketing clips it showed, which were just really difficult to discern what the game was about, and it had very weird visual style, and just the intrigue of what this game was going to be. The studio head Hideo Kojima is very well known in the gaming industry, so it was just intriguing to see what are his games like and what on earth is Death Stranding. So today I'll be able to cover all of my thoughts and experiences with the game as we explore the wonderful weirdness that is Death Stranding.
By your side, close your tired eyes. I'll wait, and soon I'll see your smile in a dream, and I won't wake before you go.
Hi there everyone, I'm the guy with no gamertag, and to get the usual housekeeping out of the way, there will be some story spoilers discussed in this video. If you want to skip them, please look out for the graphics you're seeing on the bottom of the screen. Now to start off with where most people started with this game, which was the marketing material. We saw clips that seemed to be an alternate world, World War II, tanks with tentacles on, modern soldiers in the mix, a man holding a baby. It was really bizarre and intriguing. There was also lots of engine footage which showed Leia Seydoux eating a crypto bio, which was just weird and kind of became its own meme. Whether or not they were leaning into that, I don't know, but it was just a lot of unconnected footage about this game that didn't really make any sense. But I was also becoming aware that Hideo Kojima was such a notorious game developer and was worth looking into his games. And when I looked at some reviews, I saw that the game was effectively you are the apocalypse's mailman, but it still intrigued me. The art style of the game and the controls and the way the character moved just interested me, so I decided to pick up the game. And instantly, I got hooked in by the story of this game. I'll admit, the first hour and a half, 2 hours, is a bit of an exposition dump. It throws a lot of information at you right away about the BTs, about the Death Stranding, about the plan to reunite America, the Voidout, all of that coming in a one go, that Sam's a repatriate. You get the idea that Sam's a bit of a recluse, but he's also a porter, and you just get all this information thrown at you at once. Normally, that would be just a bit overwhelming as a storytelling type. It is a little bit in this game, but in my opinion, I kind of let it get away with this just because I found it intriguing. The first encounter with the BTs with Fragile was really intimidating and really gave them an imposing presence within that scene. Then the corpse disposal segment and the eventual Voidout was such a creepy and intriguing scene that it just hooked me. I was so engrossed in what was going on in the world of this game because it was so bizarre and it was just intriguing to me. The plan to reunite America and most of the speeches by Die-Hardman are a little bit too America for me, and I think it was intentional. It was sort of the point behind it, but it did also offer up some of the slightly confusing character motivations of Sam Bridges. This section then finally ends with you having to go and dispose of the president's body in the incinerator, which finally lets you loose on the world of Death Stranding. And it is, at some points, an absolutely beautiful world, especially this first segment when you're going to the incinerator. I don't know exactly how they've achieved this, but the way they've got the render distance and the way they've made the mountains and the grass look from a distance, it actually looked really quite authentic to me. It was really impressive. I was looking at it thinking it was almost photoreal. It was really impressive. And it is a stunning world to look at in places. Not all of the biomes are as intriguing. You've always got the sort of more deserty section in the open plains when you're doing Fragile story. but you've got the grassy hills near Capital Knot City, you've got the snow-capped mountains near Mountain Knot City, and then the geothermal terrain down towards the Tar Belt. There are some absolutely stunning looking environments in this game, and it was really interesting to navigate them. Now, when I saw some of the marketing materials for this game, they were showing off all of the navigation tools. You've got the ladders, the climbing anchors, and at first I was like, why are they showing these? I don't care how I get around your level, I just want to know that there's something interesting to do. But wow, I was wrong with that opinion when it came to actually playing this game, because the navigation and how you get around the world is kind of the fun of the game. A lot of games that I've played is all about the action or the story, or making yourself better at the game, but Death Stranding is more about puzzle solving and getting from A to B. You are literally the apocalypse's mailman, so you're not going to be going fighting a war all the time or defeating monsters all the time. You are just trying to get parcels from A to B, and most of your gameplay will look like this.
It's toppled over.
And then a lot of the music that gets played in the background as you're travelling to some of the new facilities just adds this real sense of existential melancholia. It's really atmospheric. I actually love the music in this game. It is very mellow and in some cases a little bit depressing, but it kind of adds to the feeling and the kind of ambience of the game. Some of it becomes quite uplifting, and overall I just loved the soundtrack of this game, whether it was the licensed music or even just some of the scored music specifically for the game. It was just a really engrossing soundtrack, and it really just amplified the themes and the overall vibe of the game. But it's the actual effort of getting from A to B, trying to take as much cargo as you can, doing multiple drop-offs in one run, or just trying to take a different route that's slightly faster but slightly more difficult. It's those little challenges that the player gives themselves or doesn't is really what affects your enjoyment of the game. And the game gives you so many tools to traverse the area, and it's quite fun when also other players have left ladders or ropes. Whether or not they were intended for you or for themselves, it's just really helpful when you just get to somewhere you need to get down from a high place and someone's left a rope in the perfect position, or someone's built a road for you, or someone's left a zip line. It's really cathartic to know that that is there and you can actually make this delivery, because the game also offers up challenges of deliveries with a lot of cargo, time deliveries, and it adds more challenge and optional extras to the game for the player to challenge themselves. And it really does rely on the player making their own fun, or in a lot of cases making their own challenges. And I am absolutely one of the players who got way too sucked into trying to take too much cargo in one go. Especially when you get access to vehicles, you've then got to manage the battery life of the vehicle. And oh my, I've made some blunders with that. Accidentally threw one truck off of a cliff as I was low on battery. I was moments away from getting to a generator, got it stuck, and then had to spend an hour or so building a generator, making deliveries, and then finally moving the materials I was trying to move to the road paving stations that I was trying to get them to. That was one of the it was a little bit of an irritating challenge, but it was one that I had created for myself by trying to do too much in one run. There's also where you're just trying to stretch that battery life as far as you can. I had to get one delivery to a distribution centre, and it was really cutting it close, but I just managed to get on the power grid before the battery ran out. And it was just that moment-to-moment gameplay tension of, oh god, have I just created a whole lot more work for myself by trying to be a smart ass? And it kind of adds in some cathartic relief, a bit of face palming moments where you've just either screwed yourself or you've been a little bit cheeky and just about gotten away with biting off more than you can chew. Also, you do have to be a little bit careful with taking on multiple orders at one time or having multiple open orders. Because I had this happen where I had a timed delivery, but I got confused as to which of my 4 or 5 deliveries was the timed delivery. So I went off, did my deliveries, and then went and rested in my shelter. Now you only get 60 minutes in real world time to do the time delivery, but if you go and rest, it cuts 20 minutes or half an hour off of that timer. And I came back and I had 20 minutes to try and do this delivery. I then went to the wrong facility and had to rapidly try and build zip lines to get myself to the end destination, and made it back with I think less than a minute to go. I was happy that I managed to get the delivery done, but it was just oh my god, how did I mess this up so badly? And thinking that I needed to go to one place when actually I needed to be somewhere else. And it's just those little moments which kind of add some fun and some challenge to the game. Once you get to the mountainous area of the game, it is really quite challenging to move across the terrain, and that is actually kind of still one of my favourite parts of the game, just because of the challenge of crossing the mountains. The game also gives you a lot of equipment, and honestly, my favourite bits of equipment have to be floating carrier. They are so much fun. You can pile the cargo up on them and just drag them with you. You have to have chiral crystals with you to be able to power them and to keep them floating. They can be a bit temperamental, like you're trying to just get over some objects. Sometimes they will literally jump 6 feet to follow you, and sometimes they're just, nah, you're not coming up here, pal. And it can be a little bit frustrating. Again, it's those small challenges that the player is creating for themselves by going over terrain that isn't really suitable for them. But I think I only found this out in my second playthrough. You can ride the floating carriers, and this became one of my favourite ways to traverse some of the terrain in this game, because you literally just turn it into a skateboard. Of course, the first few times I got it wrong and ended up damaging all of my cargo when I fell off, but it was honestly one of my favourite bits of equipment. You've also got the zip lines, which it's weird because I have a love-hate relationship with vehicles and kind of the fast travel methods in this game. The vehicles are really fun when you first get access to them, because especially when you start taking on the mules or the terrorists later in the game, they have a lot of materials in their camps which you can use to rebuild roads or just fill up facilities or build things for yourself. But I found that after a while they make the game too easy, especially in the area between Lake Knot City and Central Knot City. It just made the game a bit too easy. You can still get caught out by BTs, but generally the world's your oyster. You can just drive past all of the dangers, and it just allows you to take lots of cargo back and forth, and it becomes a bit repetitive. I found myself in this particular playthrough actually stopping using vehicles and travelling by foot because it was more fun. However, the zip lines became one of my favourite bits of equipment in this game, especially in the mountain section, because whilst it is really fun and challenging to traverse the terrain, it takes a long time. There's a lot of snow, it slows you down. You've got to set up lots of ladders and climbing anchors to try and get you up the steeper parts of the mountains. But zip lines allow you to traverse it really quickly. It definitely turns into I'm going to spend a week automating something I could have done in 40 minutes. It took me a long time to build my network of zip lines, but once I did, I had my beacons of Gondor, which allowed me to travel anywhere within the mountains, and it was so satisfying. Although that being said, the process of setting this up was sketchy at best. Trying to set up ladders on these ridge lines on the mountains led to a lot of falling. And I also did find throughout this playthrough that ladders can be pretty janky, especially when they're not vertical. If you've got a vertical ladder, it's fine because Sam grabs it and just climbs up. But if a ladder is horizontal or like quite a shallow angle, the character control can be a bit finicky to actually get Sam to get on the ladder. And half the time I found myself slipping or like booping off. I fell off when I had a human cargo on my back, which was really irritating, especially because when you fall off a ladder on the mountains, guess where your cargo is going? To the bottom of the mountain. So yeah, the ladders could be a bit finicky, but overall the whole navigation of the world and the challenges that presents and the challenges the player presents for themselves is really the fun of the game for me. And it was what was really satisfying. I loved the story and it was really intriguing, but overall just the process of making your way through the world and those challenges that it throws at you was really interesting and really the fun of the game for me. But that being said, there's also equipment that I did not get on with. That mainly being the VOG canister. And the way the VOG canister works is that when it gets destroyed, it lets out gas which knocks someone out temporarily. And so I was carrying one of these around in case I found myself against mules, because you can throw this case at them and it should break and it'll let the gas out and knock them out, which could even knock out several human enemies at the same time. Fantastic. Until you get into one of the scripted combat sequences of the game and they shoot this canister and knock you out because you forgot you had it on your back. But it was okay, you know, I didn't make this mistake twice. But it's okay, I've now died to this twice, so I'm prepared. I now know I have basically a gaseous nuke in my pocket that I can throw and just win the game. any time I've tried to use this piece of equipment, it has only knocked me out. If I throw it at someone at close range, it breaks and knocks me out. If I throw it at someone at long range, it doesn't break. I throw it 3 or 4 times, it doesn't break. But as soon as it's on my person or close enough to knock me out, that's when it's going to break. It's the most temperamental bit of equipment in the game, and was my arch nemesis. Now, I also did have some fails in my first playthrough. Now, you won't know this because this will be the only video of it you see, but this is actually the second take of this video. I actually originally did this after I first played the game, but I wanted to redo it because I've now made so many more of the videos. I wanted to redo it in an updated style. I'll admit I never quite lived up to this particular climbing anchor. I don't know how the hell I did this, but it was pretty special. I also got my truck stuck in my first playthrough, and I was heartbroken. As soon as I unlocked the truck as a vehicle, I'd been using this going everywhere around the open plains between Lake Knot and Central Knot. I'd been using this truck here, there and everywhere, and then I got stuck in this canyon and couldn't get it out. I built a timefall shelter, and I know that vehicles do show up for other players, so although it's incredibly unlikely, it would be funny if anyone has ever seen this truck in their game, and perhaps the shelter they put there for it to try and keep it safe. But yeah, this truck met an unfortunate end. But that being said, another player managed to do an even more impressive job in my second playthrough and got a truck stuck at the Chiral Artist studio. Like, how did they even get their truck here? Like, how did they get it up the stairs and then try and turn it around to get it stuck on the rail? I don't know how they did this. Like, I'm actually impressed that they did that. I mean, it was annoying because I had to then put ladders up to get into this facility, but I don't know how the hell they actually got their truck stuck there. Like, I'm not even tilted. I'm just impressed at this player's fuck up. It is honestly one of my highlights of this second playthrough. And then my final fail was actually in the end credit section of the game. You won't get any particular spoilers from this. How did I create this animation? I don't know. But given the tone of the game at this point, it made me really laugh my ass off. But this just focuses on the challenges of the player trying to get to their location. The game does offer some options for combat as well. You've got the mules who steal cargo and hoard it in their bases. You then later in the game get terrorists who will shoot at you with firearms. And you then got the scripted combat segments of the game, where you go to World War I, World War II and Vietnam. And these sections of the game are absolutely phenomenal. The audio design was stunning, the soundtrack and the intrigue that these sections gave was fantastic. The art style was incredible, and it was really just sort of unnerving and creepy the way you fought through these battlefields, and it was some of my favourite sections of the game. But it's also kind of highlights one of the potential problems of this game. It was something that didn't bother me because I liked the navigation and the exploration in the game. I liked the delivery side of it. But a lot of players found that too slow, a bit too repetitive, a bit too boring, which is a shame because they miss out on these amazing parts of the game because it takes quite a long time to get there. In this second playthrough, I wasn't trying to 100% every facility. At first, I went through the first area as quickly as I could, but then got a little bit hooked into the deliveries in the second area on the plains. But it took me 9 hours to get to this section of the game where you first fight against a BT and you meet Higgs, who honestly, that was one of the coolest villain introductory exposition speeches. It was so well executed. Troy Baker did a fantastic job as Higgs, and it was such a cool scene. It was so enigmatic and had so much gravitas behind it. I just absolutely love this scene.
The name's Higgs, the particle of God that permeates all existence.
But it took 9 hours to get to this point. It took me 28 hours to get to the World War I segment of the game where you fight Clifford Unger, 40 hours to get to World War II, which was the segment of the game which was first teased in the trailers for Death Stranding, and 52 hours to actually get to the Tar Belt where you're finally crossing that section to get to Edge Knot City. There's a huge amount of time investment to get to these scripted combat segments of the game. And overall, my playthrough time was about 60.5 hours, which doesn't bother me because I enjoyed the game. I enjoyed the navigation, the deliveries, and the combat sequences were like icing on the cake for me because it added this extra intrigue and this extra challenge to the player. But for a lot of players, they miss out on that because of how long it takes to get to some of it. Maybe the pacing of the game could have been changed so that players had more of an idea of what they were going to get into later in the game. But also, it's kind of the artistic vision of the game. Like, the point isn't that it's a shoot everything up combat game. It is you are trying to reunite a country, and you have to do that by making deliveries. The deliveries was always the focus of the game, to help this game explore death and connectivity between people as its central themes. Now, I will say about the combat sections of the game, the sensitivity on controller does feel a little bit weird, and shooting does just feel a little bit hard to control, but maybe that was also the point. Again, Sam is not a soldier, he is a porter. He doesn't need to have laser-like accuracy, and perhaps that was the intention of the design there. Also, I did find, especially when you've got lots of grenade pouches on your bag, it's difficult to find the right one. Admittedly, this was me being an idiot. I didn't realise that when you use the D-pad controls, you have an extra button to scroll through pages. So I spent my time trying to find a frag grenade and not knowing where it was, having to go into the menu to then put it in my hand. And that was tedious, but that was me being an idiot. But I think, and whilst I don't understand the difficulties of programming this, maybe it would have been more streamlined if their game had some sort of context system. Of like, if you're in these dedicated combat areas where like hematic grenades don't make any sense, or your EX grenades don't make any sense, that it prioritizes lethal items because you have to use them in these sections of the game. And also, on a side note, I have to say, this game, I don't know whether it was meta or just ahead of its time in making bottled bathwater and piss so valuable items in this game. Playing through it now with more recent context and just the whole internet culture we have now, it actually kind of made it funny, and it was just, oh god, why is this shouldn't be funny, but it actually kind of is. But overall, where the game really builds its intrigue is, of course, with its story. The quest to rebuild America is the main plot point, but overall the bits of the story that are more intriguing is just learning more about the characters that you are meeting along the way and are helping you. Fragile has one of the longest segments in the game, but her story was really intriguing, and she was a really interesting character, understanding how Higgs betrayed her and the sacrifice she had to make to stop Central Knot City being completely destroyed. Mama and Lochner's story was really unexpected but intriguing at the same time, realising that her surrogate child is a BT, and her journey of having to let go not only of her child but of herself, that then reuniting her with her twin sister Lochner. And then you've got the absolute heartbreak of Hartman's story and the mystique of his character constantly searching the beach for his family, who he's probably never going to find. And it was interesting because it also started to get Sam to open up a bit more, and you start to understand a bit more of his history and his past as a character. But it's also slightly unearthed by Deadman during his section of the game, where he's finding out more information about Sam and more of the reasons why he's so attached to Lou, his BB. And also Deadman understanding the connection between a human and their BB. It is easy to form that emotional connection to them. And how he himself doesn't have an afterlife, and how that affects his outlook on the Death Stranding. He doesn't have the afterlife that everyone else does. And it's just these really unusual stories that each of these characters has, their unusual struggles. It's really what makes them so interesting, because you kind of understand what they have been through and what they are now trying to achieve with those struggles. It's really intriguing, and it was what made the second area of the game so intriguing. It was a little bit frustrating to me that the process of getting from Lake Knot to Central Knot takes quite a long time. It is quite a repetitive area of the game, because it kind of does gatekeep some of the really interesting bits of the story, like the second BT encounter at Mama's facility, finding out about Deadman, finding out about Hartman. It was really interesting, but it takes so long to get there at times. I know it has been what's put off some people that I've recommended the game to, but it is so intriguing. And then you get towards Edge Knot City, you find Amelie, you fight Higgs's BT, you eventually find and defeat Higgs, and then the game changes, because Clifford Unger, who's had an ever more increasing presence in the game, is starting to interweave with the story a lot more. He's actually got some connection with Die-Hardman and Bridget Strand, and it's really mysterious, and it brings this character who's been a temporary antagonist, is he the one pulling the strings all along? And it just creates this extra level of intrigue. And then of course it is all revealed towards the end of the game that it was Amelie who was pulling the strings all along. And overall it was a really interesting story. It intrigued me in a number of places. Sometimes the sole like, oh, it's about America was very forced and kind of cringy. I'm assuming that was actually an intentional thing. And also when Mama dies and her and Lochner become one, the sort of bits where Sam kept confusing them, I do understand it from a story perspective, because yeah, you would be confused if you're used to hearing Mama's voice, but now you're speaking to Lochner, but it is Mummer who is speaking to you. It would be confusing from Sam's perspective, but at this point the player is aware of this, and it sort of feels like it's just retreading the same ground, which in some ways it feels like the game isn't giving the player credit enough to have a functioning memory, but it is also kind of exploring the game from Sam's perspective. But overall, I found the story intriguing, and it really did draw me in. The world they created, the enemy types, whether it was the BTs, whether it was the human combatants, or whether it's just the challenges the player creates for themselves, it ultimately made a game that I found really satisfying and enjoyable. I loved this game's exploration of death and its overall themes of connectivity. It really was quite poignant, especially as this game came out around the COVID-19 pandemic, and it was just a really interesting exploration of these themes. It's a game I really like, and I'm really looking forward to the sequel that is coming out as I'm recording this in 7 days, so I'm really looking forward to that. It looks visually stunning, and so I of course wanted to do this voiceover before I get into that game, so it doesn't start to warp my opinions of the original. But overall, Death Stranding is a game that I would love to recommend to people. But you do have to temper the fact that the gameplay is slow, and it is mostly a logistics based game. You've got to get yourself from A to B. That is what you will spend the majority of your time doing. But if that's what intrigues you, and if the overall themes of the game seem like something you'd want to play, I would definitely recommend it. It's one of the most artistically unique games that I have played. It's one of the most bizarre stories, but it's one of the ones that stuck with me because of that, and it's why I like it, and it's why I would recommend it to people. I've been so tempted to go back and try and 100% all the facilities, but the sequel's coming out soon, so I'll be getting onto that fairly soon instead. But anyway, I do hope you've enjoyed this video. Please feel free to leave your thoughts and experiences on it in the comment section down below, and feel free to like and subscribe for the remaining videos of this series if you would like to see them. But anyway, I've been the guy with no gamertag, and I'll see you on another video.